Namaskar. The history of Ananda Marga is extraordinary and colorful, and I can only just give you some small pieces of it, otherwise it's going to take too long. About the youth of our guru, Sri Sri Anandamurti, or as gurus are called, Baba. I'll be talking about that in another video. Let it be enough to say that at the age of 18, in the year 1939, he did his first initiation, and that was followed over the next few years by hundreds more of initiations, and yet none of the people knew each other. They all had to keep it secret who was the guru, and they couldn't tell, and they didn't know who else were the disciples. In 1941, Baba, I prefer to call the guru just as Baba, as most of the gurus in India are called. Baba was, he started to work in the city where he was born, which was Jamalpur, Bihar, in the biggest railway manufacturing center in all of Southeast Asia, or in all of East Asia, or in all of South Asia, and surely in all of India anyway. And he was an accountant, and then gradually he became an auditor, a high-ranking auditor in this huge factory. Now, as some years went by, and finally in 1955, he called some of the disciples together, and he created Ananda Marga. That was the first time that the disciples came to meet each other, and many of them were working in the factory. Of course, there were so many others from other places, but they were amazed, to meet each other. And it was on the 9th of March in 1955 that the first Dharma Mahachakra was given, the great Dharma Chakra. When Baba was present, it's called Dharma Mahachakra. And when Baba would give a mudra and people would go into samadhi and different kinds of high states of mind. So he created an Ananda Marga, and it came with the motto, self-realization and service to humanity. Not very soon after that, Baba started to create the first acharyas. All of the acharyas who were teaching meditation, they were all, of course, family people. And this went on for quite some years, that all of the initiations and higher lessons in Ananda Marga were given by family people. But right from the start, we began getting opposition from dogmatic religious groups, especially dogmatic Hindu groups, because right from the start, Ananda Marga strongly opposed the caste system and also opposed the system of dowry, where the wife's family has to pay a lot of money to the husband's family in order for the girl to become married. And we supported what we called revolutionary, and we still do support what is called revolutionary marriages, intercaste marriages without dowry. It was not only revolutionary in those days, it's even revolutionary to some significant extent in India today. We also do this outside of India, where there's a mixing of races and so on. Now, in 1958, Baba introduced Renaissance Universal and Renaissance Artists and Writers Association. And this Renaissance Artists and Writers Association, it was for the purpose of organizing artists of all types, musicians, painters, sculptors, actors, all kinds of artists, with the understanding that whenever any great change would come in the society, it would first come through the arts. So it's not arts for itself, art for art's sake. It is rather arts for real service to the society, arts for service and blessedness. And Renaissance Universal is an intellectual club, so the intellectuals would become activated. And I'll just go through what happened. Then in 1959, Baba introduced the most controversial aspect of Ananda Marga. Even until today, it is the most controversial, and that is PROUT. P-R-O stands for progressive, U stands for utilization, T stands for theory, the progressive utilization theory, or PROUT. Now, PROUT is very different than capitalism or communism. It is a system, and it is a socioeconomic system, which stands for self-sufficient economic democracy. Self-sufficient means, of course, that communities, cities, countries, areas, they should become self-sufficient and minimally need to import anything. And at the same time, they should be running in a democratic way through empowering and giving the right to the very grassroots people in the decision making of what they are involved in, mostly through cooperatives. In this way, the PROUT system is very strongly against poverty and at the same time for self-empowerment, and it frees the society step by step from poverty, which is essentially freeing them from economic slavery. PROUT also started cultural movements, anti-exploitation movements, anti-corruption movements, and thus the opposition to Ananda Marga grew. It spread not only from the religious fanatics to politicians and corrupt politicians, essentially, and corrupt business people. So from that time, the Indian government and some very strong vested interests, they started to consider Ananda Marga is dangerous. At the same time, Ananda Marga was growing exponentially, very fast. In the beginning, it was only these hundreds of people, and then it became thousands of people, and then it became hundreds of thousands of people in India alone at that time. In 1962, Baba started the system of those who would do meditation in the graveyard in the midnight on the new moon, which is called Kapalik meditation, which is a beautiful meditation which fights against fear, shame, and hatred. And I practice it, and so many Dadas and Didis, we do this practice, although the Didis don't do mostly in the graveyard. They'll do in a more protected place, usually. Then in 1963, we started a huge project, huge land project, this is all in India, in a place called Anandanagar, which is in West Bengal, with many diverse types of projects there, with schools and hospital and children's home and hostels, and all these kind of projects were there, and more came over the years. Then Baba started the education, relief, and welfare section. So the relief activities, they grew tremendously, and in 1965, AMURT was started. The AMURT stands for Ananda Marga Universal Relief Team, which is especially active in times of natural and man-made catastrophes, floods, earthquakes, mudslides, fires, and so on. And that work has been going on ever since then in tremendous quantity all over the world, I'll tell you in a moment, which is just now. In 1966, the first Acharya left India and went out and started to spread Ananda Marga. The first one went to Africa and then to Maharlika, which means the Philippines, and so it spread. And Ananda Marga became more threatening, essentially, to those who were at that time against it. finally, in 1967, this is already 12 years after the start of Ananda Marga, finally in 1967, Baba left his job to work full-time for Ananda Marga. Until then, he had been the weekend guru, essentially. And yet Ananda Marga had grown so big. And he went to Anandanagar. And that was just too much for those vested interests to take, especially the communists, because the communists, they were in control. They were the elected government at that time, they're no longer, of the state of West Bengal, a huge state, where Anandanagar is. And the communists attacked. A few people were killed. That was 1967. It was such an intense exploitation, corruption which was going on that we exposed, and they reacted. Yes, these people were brought to the court, many of them were put in the jail, but anyway, it was a blow. They thought it would be a death blow to Ananda Marga, but it didn't. Actually, still Ananda Marga became stronger. And by 1969, 6 of the 12 police commissioners in the state of Bihar, which was just next to West Bengal, now it's divided into 2 states, they were Ananda Margis. And they had a policy of not taking bribe, and they stood against all their police officers taking bribe, and that created a tremendous hostility in many individuals because the police were dependent on bribes at that time. As a result of that, in the parliament, a decision was taken that Ananda Marga should be considered a political organization, and therefore anyone in the government could not join it, but we took that case to the Supreme Court and won it. So they couldn't stop. And these are all the efforts to stop Ananda Marga, which went on more, I'm going to be telling you, have never succeeded. But what happened after that? Well, 1970, finally Baba introduced the kirtan that you know about, singing Bhavanam Kevalam, which is very powerful and made Ananda Marga much stronger inside of India and in the very few countries where it was by then outside of India. And finally in 1971, after all the efforts that they were making to stop us had failed, they lodged a case against Baba himself. They arrested him and put him in the jail on concocted charges. And he remained in the jail with protests going on against the injustice which was there. And 2 years later, in 1973, while still in the jail, it looked like we were going to win the court case, and a prison doctor gave an injection to Baba, and it poisoned him. And he lost his sight. He went into a coma at first. Finally, when he came out of the coma, no sight. After some few days, some of his sight came back, but his sight was impaired until the end of his life. He needed thick glasses after that. And when he made a protest about that, it was ignored. And so he started a protest fast in 1973. And he continued this fast for 5 years, taking no food at all, only taking liquid twice a day, some drink twice a day for 5 years. Can you imagine? Maximum people thought he would die. Now I was Acharya all that time. I became Acharya. I came into Ananda Marga in 1971. I became Acharya in 1972. I couldn't meet Baba during the time he was in the jail. And finally, after 7 years in jail, 5 of those years fasting, it was proven that he was innocent and released from the jail. But in the meantime, what had happened? In 1975, the government declared martial law because they were getting a lot of trouble from the extreme corruption that was present in that government. And that martial law went on for 2 years, during which time almost all of our dadas and didi in India were in the jail. They were in the jail with huge numbers of thousands of other very progressive people. And instead of it destroying Ananda Marga, which they hoped because Baba was also in the jail, it strengthened Ananda Marga because we met some of the best people in the jails. And when the emergency finished and that government fell and the new government came in, so many people became our friends who now were in a position of influence. Yes. So in 1977, while still being in the jail, Baba created the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals and Plants Department, which is the ecological department of Ananda Marga. And finally, 1978, he was released from the jail, and Ananda Marga then started to spread like wildfire. Now, Baba had said he would come out of the jail when Ananda Marga was 16 times stronger than it had been when he entered. And indeed, that's what happened. When he went in the jail in 1971, Ananda Marga was in 5 countries. When he came out of the jail in 1978, it was in 80 countries, exactly 16 times stronger. And then out of the jail, he introduced the Kaushiki dance that you all have learned. And in 1982, he introduced neo-humanism, which is essentially a universalism. And then these are all very impactful things. You'll learn about them step by step. They're amazing things. And then he introduced the Prabhat Sangeet songs that some of you have already been singing. He started teaching songs, and he went on for 8 years until the end of his life. And he composed more songs than anyone in the history. It means 5,018 songs. Amazing songs. Very respected among some of the most classical singers in India. 1986, he gave the concept of microvita. This is a concept which goes at the root of physics and quantum physics and explains how everything in this universe is made, how even energy is made. Then he explained that there's a pole shift which has started. North and South poles are shifting, and they will shift more and more. And this was an unknown idea at that time. Later, scientists also started to agree with that. Now it's a common understanding among scientists that the poles are shifting, and they don't understand that there's going to come an extremely major shift of the poles. Actually, they do know it, and that it's overdue. And Baba explained all of this. Then and so many things developed, but I'm running out of time. And finally, in 1990, I should say, 1989 and in 1990, Baba increased the speed of Ananda Marga. You can't count how much it was increased. It was tremendous. It was night and day working. When I was there, and I went so many times, I used to go many times a year to India, ever since from 1978 to 1990. And we would have reporting even in the middle of the night. He used to teach avadhutas like myself the meditation in small groups of 3 or 4 or 5 or 6. But at that time, he said, I want 100 in one time to teach. And he introduced the speed of teaching the Prabhat Sangeet. Sometimes he was composing 10, 11, 12, 13 Prabhat Sangeet in a day, even when his health started to collapse and so on. So speed was coming, tremendous speed was coming, tremendous pressure on all of the dadas and didis for the work which was going on. And finally, Baba, he said, he told that I'm going to leave the earth tomorrow. And everyone got shocked until he told it was just a poem. But he actually did leave the very next day, October 21st, 1990. No problem. Of course, it was totally crushing to us and totally shocking and surprising. But he had said the moment that my work is done, I will not stay even one moment longer. So when he left us with a comprehensive spiritual and social philosophy. He left us with a complex, active, and very strong organization, worldwide organization. He left a system which is unique, of a cooperation between the family people and the monks and nuns, the renunciates we say, that we all work together, that it is not that we have a priest caste or something who is more elevated than all. Everybody has equal potential to become spiritually elevated and to have tremendous responsibility in the organization. So since then, until now, what has happened? Just more and more expansion. The persecution against Ananda Marga essentially stopped. And in the meantime, we have created thousands of schools. As I mentioned in the Karma Yoga video, we've created thousands of schools. We have scores and scores of children's homes. We have many, many medical institutions and hospitals. We have created land projects on communities in which there's organic gardening and so many different projects on each of those lands. There are more than 100 of those around the world. We have made Amurt very strong in its catastrophe relief work, and it has become famous in the NGO community, and the most respected foundations in the world, they are funding Amurt work also. Even the number one most difficult to get their support is called USAID. Even they fund us sometimes. And we are respected because we spend very, very little money on administration. We maximally utilize whatever funding we have, and we do maximum work. So Ananda Marga has spread to almost all the countries of the world, and even Prout, even though it is mostly still on the intellectual level, and there are movements, some anti-exploitation movements and anti-corruption movements, but finally Prout is making some real socioeconomic models. And one of the first of those models is in the city of Oroqueta, in Misamis Occidental, in Maharlika, in the Philippines, a city of 80,000 people. And we will see. It has been working for the last 2-3 years, and over the next few months, it will become a real model. Ananda Marga does not belong to any individual. It does not belong to any group. It does not belong to the acharyas. It belongs to all of us. It belongs to all the people. And not only the people in Ananda Marga, but the people in the whole world. And Prout is much more than an Ananda Marga structure. The maximum number of people who are active in Prout are not members of Ananda Marga, and so it must be, because our work is for everyone. But of all of the people in Ananda Marga, the most important person is you. Thank you.